Rabbi Nadel asked me to talk about Rambam and Hilchos Tainus. You're there, right? Okay, so I'm going to put what I have on the screen for everybody who's joining us, and we'll begin. It's Tammuz now, and usually there's a fast day in Tammuz. I like to preface this with what the Rambam brings at the very bottom. If you're following along, everybody has a sheet. I have here included the last chapter of Rambam's Hilchos Tainus. Okay, where go to the very last halacha. It's on the second page. It says Hey Yud Tet. It's before it says Hilchos Shabbos. Should have made it a little bigger, or whatever. So the Rambam brings Kol Asamotha Elu Atidin Libatel Limoda Mashiach. All of these fast days will be annulled, or in this case, it means I guess they would become pointless in the times of the Messiah. V'lo od ela shehem atidim liot yamim tovim v'meisa sonu simcha. Not only that, not that you'll just cancel Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, for example, but it'll actually be Yom Tov. What does it mean a Yom Tov? Not Yom Tov in the sense that we won't be able to do malacha and we'll daven musaf. It means a yontiv Purim style. Purim is the quintessential rabbinically enacted Yom Tov, a day of feasting. We mesa son v'simcha, days of gladness and happiness. Shneimar, Ko amar Hashem Tzvaoth, Som HaRevi'i, with Som HaChamishi, with Som HaShiva'i, with Som HaAsiri. The Lord of Hosts thus says, the fast of the 4th and the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th and the fast of the 10th. There is an opinion that says that these are days of the month. There is a fast day that's on the 4th and a fast day on the 5th of the month, whichever month it is, and a fast on the 7th and a fast on the 10th. But we reject that opinion. We say, no, it's referring to the months. The fast that we normally keep in the 4th month, which is a reference to Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Tammuz is the 4th month. And the fast of the 5th month is Tisha B'Av. The fast of the 7th month, that's not referring to Yom Kippur, it's referring to Tzom Gedalyah, with Som HaAsiri, the fast of the 10th month, which is the 10th of Teves. It's the 10th of the month, and it's during the 10th month. Yeh Leveith Yehuda L'Sason U'Simcha, shall be for the house of Judah, for gladness and happiness. U'Moadim, a set time, Tovim. The expression Yom Tov is not necessarily biblical. What you and I refer to as a Yom Tov is usually referred to as a type of Mo'ed, more specifically Mikra Kodesh. Mikra Kodesh is, or Shabbat, is the correct technical biblical term for what you and I call Yom Tov, but that's what it's going to be. Wa'amet wa'shalom ehavu, and you should love truth and peace. Now, that was myself. Okay, you could just mute that so it won't have feedback. Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Just making sure we're still online with everybody. There are people trying to connect. Now, what is this verse referring to? And did this ever happen in Jewish history? This is a discussion in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. When was this statement made? It's attributed to Zechariah. We could find the book of Zechariah. Zechariah was the prophet in the early Second Temple times. And he was approached with this halachic question. The question was, now that the temple has been rebuilt, should the Jewish people continue fasting on the fast days that they had created, accepted upon themselves to mark important dates along the process that led to the destruction of the first temple? What happened on the, let's say, in the 10th month? What happened on the 10th month in Tevet, leading up to the destruction of the first temple? That's when the Babylonians besieged Jerusalem. What happened on the 17th of Tammuz, or about the 17th of Tammuz? The Gemara actually points out that if you read your Bible, you see that a number of things happened in Tammuz. Apparently something happened on the 7th and on the 10th. And it could very well be that what we mark on the 17th of Tammuz, the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem, when the siege actually started. Not only they were besieging, normally a siege means they're just choking you out and starving you. But in this case, they actually breached the walls, and Babylonians were able to actually enter Jerusalem. The fighting entered the city. So the Yerushalmi points out, God himself, so to speak, was confused because of his people's troubles And he himself was confused about the dates. So if you actually look, there's discrepancies between the various prophetic books about when this exactly happened. God was as confused as we were because of the troubles. But we mark that entirely on the 17th of Tammuz because the sages didn't want too many fast days. If we had to fast for everything bad that happened in Tammuz, we'd have about 4 fast days or so. Same thing with Tisha B'Av. There's that which happened on, I think it's the 5th. Some events happened on the 7th, as noted in the Bible. Some happened on the 9th. And the actual burning down of the second temple occurred when? On the 10th of Av. That's when the second temple actually was burned down. They defiled the place on the 9th. So the sages didn't want to give us too many fast days. So they said that we concentrate all the troubles of Av on one day, the 9th of Av. They used to keep these fast days. Tzom Gedalia, by the way, what happened on Tzom Gedalia? A few weeks after the destruction of the temple, Gedalia was assassinated, and the remaining Jews who were in the land of Israel had to flee to Egypt. So that was the end of perhaps even the rebirth of the Commonwealth, and that's basically the 4 fast days. So during the times of the Babylonian exile, they had a custom to keep these fast days. The question was, now that the temple has been rebuilt, is it proper that we continue the fast days? I'll tell you pshat that Rav Hershey Schechter gives in this really long answer. Zechariah actually gives an answer that spans more than a chapter over here. It's quite long, but this was his bottom line. The gist of his longer response is they're asking a halachic question of a Navi, which already itself is a little bit convoluted. Why? Because you do not ask halachic questions of a Navi. A Navi is not supposed to give a halachic opinion on his authority as a Navi. Lo b'shamayim he. If it's a Torah question, you're supposed to ask the rabbis, the chachamim. A Navi might tell you the future, or a Navi will give you a hora'at sha'ah, a one-time dispensation or one-time order to do something. But he will not give you, he's not supposed to give, Kol Amar Hashem, here's the halacha. He was telling them, basically, you're asking me, God, a question of halacha regarding the fast days that you created in observance of a tragedy that you brought upon yourselves. I had told you, keep the Torah. I gave you a whole list of thou shalt nots and a whole list of thou shalts. And you did not keep that list, generally speaking, and you received a punishment, so you created fast days. According to the Torah, when is one supposed to fast? We saw the Rambam at the beginning. When is one supposed to fast? What? And Yom Kippur. Yeah, you're supposed to avoid, just to do this when you want to repent. Eight Sarah, according to what the Rambam wrote here, when you see the troubles are coming, and right now, let's say there was a war, there were the Amalekite barbarians surrounding the Commonwealth of Israel and threatening to kill a lot of Jews. Nor we succeeded in killing a lot of Jews, so we had to go to war against them. So we should be instituting public fast days like we've had over the course of this past year. That's what the Torah demands according to the Rambam, and Yom Kippur. But to create a fast day on the anniversary of a major event in the destruction of the first Jewish Commonwealth and the temple, that is not asked of the Torah. So God was saying, why are you asking me regarding that which you created? I told you to keep the Torah. And this is not one of those things. So if you want to know about these fast days, you go, you decide. You're the ones who created them, so you guess you could make the rules about them. But he concludes by telling them that these days are actually marked on the calendar to be glad days. Eventually they will be Simcha and Sason. Historically speaking, it's a little bit of a machlokes how these were observed in Second Temple times. Rambam says in Second Temple times, these fast days were not observed except for Tisha B'Av. And even then, the Tisha B'Av of the Second Temple, let's say in the times of Yehuda Maccabee, what was Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av was not a day where you sit down on the floor and read your kinnis and don't put on tefillin. It was a day like Yom Kippur, like the Rambam says. Really, an ideal fast day is like the Navi Yeshayahu said. It's a Yom Kippur, but you could, even then, you're not supposed to do malacha. If you have a real fast day, tell people, don't do malacha. It's a day of mechila, slicha, and kapara, extra prayers, slichos, the whole Shemona Esrei, which you're going to see. That's what you're supposed to do, as described in Maseches Tainis. And even in the Rambam's days himself, the way he describes what should be done on Tisha B'Av, yes, there are prohibitions when Tisha B'Av is observed as a day of mourning, so we don't eat meat, we're actually fasting, we don't wear our sandals, etc., the 5 Inuyim. But in the synagogue, Tisha B'Av is supposed to be a day of increased prayer. It's kind of strange that the common practices, at least in the past years, regarding Tisha B'Av, has anybody ever seen Slichot on Tisha B'Av? I think I mentioned this. You ever see say Slichos on Tisha B'Av? Are they in your siddur? You have extra Slichos for the other fast days, right? Kind of strange. And you don't even say Tachanun on Tisha B'Av according to the common custom. That's not a Maimonidean custom. According to the Rambam, there should be Tachanun on Tisha B'Av. There should be a lot more Tachanun on Tisha B'Av, many times a day. It's like Yom Kippur, which, by the way, the Rambam says, what are you supposed to do? The Vilna Gaon held like this. Tisha B'Av, which is not the standard, let's say, art scroll practice. Tisha B'Av, you're supposed to have slichis every single service, just like you have a vidui every service, right? But I looked in the art scroll, they only have slichis when on Yom Kippur, at Mariv and at Ne'ilah. Shacharis, Musaf, and Mincha, someone took out the slichis. Very strange. There's a lot of piyutim, and you manage to stay in shul all day long within 1 hour break, but all the extra slichas are missing. The Rambam says you're supposed to have nefilas apai many times a day on Yom Kippur. It's kind of missing. Either way, that's what the fast day is supposed to be. And he claims they used to observe Tisha B'Av this way during Second Temple times. So during Second Temple times, these fast days were just off the calendar. They weren't a yontif, but they didn't strictly observe them. And the Gemara continues and says, Yesh Shalom, they're not fast days. Ein Shalom, they are fast days. Now, the question there is, big machlokas of the Rishonim, so how do you define shalom? What does it mean when there's time of peace? And that's difficult. Some say when the temple's standing, some say when the Jews are not being actively persecuted. And it so happens that there were times in Jewish history where there actually was a question, things were actually quite good, such that many great sages believed that even though the Second Temple has long been destroyed, we do not fast on these days. The most famous, by the way, I don't normally refer to a teaching as famous. That's yeshivish for classic. Okay, but when I refer to a person, I mean famous. The most famous of the Mishneh sages, who is a major makel, which means he was very lenient in his opinion regarding the observance of these fast days, is none other than Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi believed in his day, apparently. The Vilna Gaon points this out in his Ber Hagra to Hilchos Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the compiler of the Mishnah himself, believed that things were good in his day such that it was a question if they should even observe Tisha B'Av. The other fast days he was already with which he was makel. He felt Tisha B'Av in many circumstances should not be observed as a fast day. For example, if it falls out on Shabbos, it's nidche, not nidche to Sunday. I mean, pushed off to Sunday, it's nidche. This year, no Tisha B'Av. That was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's opinion, and he had other makel opinions. How could he be so makel? Where did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi live, by the way? He lived up north in Sipori, if I'm not mistaken. That's in the Galil. Was there a temple in his days? No, there was not. Why was he so makel? Because in his time, there was peace. And his connections with the Roman authorities made it that the Jewish people in the land of Israel were quite well off. It was a little bit of a nechama in 2 generations after the destruction of the temple. They say Rabbi Akiva lived through the destruction of the Second Temple and was put to death immediately after the Bar Kokhba wars during the Hadrianic persecutions, which was in the next century. The day Rabbi Akiva died, that is the day he was executed violently, they say was the day Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was born. Okay? There was a big shift between the times of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who were contemporaries by maybe one day. It doesn't say, but was Rabbi born and then Rabbi Akiva died? Or they first killed Rabbi Akiva and then Rabbi was born? Okay, machlokas there. We don't really know. But the point is, things improved for the better. So when we encounter these fast days, like we're going to do now, we have to keep in mind, what does God really intend? I'm trying to put out something in writing, point out that really, if you're wondering what the next Jewish holiday is going to be, you open up your calendar. I said this before. I do not understand why it is that all those calendar makers, Od Lifnei, Rosh Hashanah, you go into your Sfarim store in Elul, and they already have a calendar for Tufshin Pei Hey ready for you. It'll tell you the dates of everything. They'll even tell you that this year Tufshin Pei Hey as Rosh Hashem should be Shana Tova Muvareches, and Tisha B'Av is going to be this day of the year. Here are the fasting times, and it's been 1,956 years since the destruction of the temple. So if you're already going into the new year, Bezras Hashem, we're going to have a Tisha B'Av. So it means your attitude is wrong. The attitude of the Navi is that it shouldn't be that way. They should say, Yontif of Tisha B'Av will start at sundown on so-and-so day of the year, and they should maybe include in an appendix saying, here were the ways they used to observe Tisha B'Av when it was a day of mourning. That would be a more appropriate response. And I believe that, indeed, we would be in the Messianic era, and we'd be much better off as a people if we all had that attitude when we go into the new year, which is why I am very reluctant to right now begin discussing even these halachas as though I have confidence, God willing, that this year, next week, we'll have the Shavasar B'Tammuz, and we'll do it exactly as we always have. I'm hoping and I pray and that by this time next week, there will not be a Shavasar B'Tammuz to talk about, and this will be the study of the history of what they used to do. You have a question there? It'll be no. It'll be a yontif. Yeah, so that's what I'm going for. Well, July 4th in England. Okay. Yeah, that's also, I remember growing up. Sometimes July 4th came out on Shavasar B'Tammuz. So yeah, so what wins? Yeah, okay. Just like quite often, what holiday coincides with Asar B'Teves? Christmas. Christmas marks Asar B'Teves. Well, yeah, but it's actually, as we discussed before, the Jewish observance of Asar B'Teves includes Christmas. Okay, that's what the Torah is getting at. It was the texts are censored, and the good text they returned it now. When it says bad things happened on the 9th of Teves, right? It says Ezra and Nehemiah died on the 9th of Teves. So what's wrong with that? Every rabbi has a yurtzeit. It wasn't the tragedy that Ezra or Nehemiah died in the time of peace. As a matter of fact, that was the whole question. In Ezra and Nehemiah's time, the question was, should we still even be observing Asar B'Teves? So, it doesn't make sense that they would add to that observance. Ella, as it's pointed out by the new critical editions, the old censored texts say that it's what's-his-face's birthday is the 9th of Teves, and that's part of the Jewish observance. So, yeah, that sometimes happens. So, like I said, I'm very reluctant to want to study these halachas as halacha l'ma'aseh because they're not meant to be that way, and hopefully they'll never be that way again. And things have been improving, by the way. You see it, there's been steady improvement. I myself have seen this. I've discussed this before, so we won't repeat ourselves. We'll go to the top of the page for the first halacha. The Rambam says, "Yesh sham yamim shekol Yisrael mitanim bahem." There are those days that all Israel fasts on them. By the way, the extra sham we've said before. Why does the Rambam, starting from the very beginning, throw in a sham here and there? So sham means there, right? There is over there fast days. Why does the Rambam speak that way or write that way? Because that's how you write it in Arabic. Just like you say in English, there is. In Hebrew, you say yesh. You ever think about it? Why do we say there is? Why don't we just say is? We add this preposition there, like over there. Why do we do that in English? What's that word doing? When you think about it, that's what the Rambam's doing here in Arabic and in English and in Rambam's Arabic influenced rabbinic Hebrew. He also throws in a sham. Okay, saying there happens to be days on which all Israel fasts. Mipnei hatzarot she'ere'u bahem, because of the tragedies that happened on them. Kedei lo re'ah halovavot, in order to awaken the hearts. Uliftoach darkei tshuva, open up the paths of tshuva, repentance. V'yezeh zikaron l'ma'asenu haraim. This should be a memorial. What? Not of the good things. Ma'asenu haraim, our wicked deeds. Uma'asei avuthenu, and the actions of our fathers. Shehaya k'ma'asenu ata, which is just like what we're doing now. We haven't really gotten over that hump. We're still continuing their mistakes. Ad shegaram lahem v'lanu otan atzarot, till it brought about upon them and us those very troubles. If you were wondering, well, the Holocaust that happened, that ended almost 80 years ago, right? But we ourselves have seen in our own days, we got a little taste of a Holocaust also here in Israel, and we have to know, why do those things happen? What's the metaphysical reason? Because God's trying to wake us up. You're supposed to take it to advantage. By the way, notice the Rambam says not avelut. The point is not mourning. There's a whole section the Rambam talks about Hilchot Avel or Avel. Okay, Avel is the guy who has an Avel. Avel is a period of mourning. It's not about mourning per se. It's a chance for repentance. And here are the days. Yom Shloshah b'Tishrei, the third day of Tishrei, Shebo Nehara Gedalia ben Achikam. Well, that day, Gedalia ben Achikam, the governor of Judah, as he was appointed, was killed. Was he really killed on the third of Tishrei? If you read the book of Yirmiyahu and Sefer Melachim, it seems he was killed on the first of the month, which would be Rosh Hashanah. So why observe it on the third day of the year? Because we observe the first 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. The implication is that if you'd only have a 1 day Rosh Hashanah, so we observed Tzom Gedalia on the second day of Tishrei. And it's a good question, which we've made mention of this before, that it wasn't entirely the case that throughout Jewish history, the Jews, let's say here in Jerusalem, had a 2 day Rosh Hashanah. There were times where it was actually a safek, something that could have happened, or maybe, in some years where it actually did happen. It was never just a permanent thing. We're going to have 2 day Rosh Hashanah, that's it. What happened with the death of Gedalia? And thus was extinguished the last remaining coal of Israel. What happened? He's referring to the Jewish community. There was a very small Jewish community, a few men in every town, and a few groups, concentrations like in the Mitzpah, where Gedalia was, of Jewish people. Why did Nebuchadnezzar leave Jewish people around in all the cities of the land of Israel just like that? What was his interest? If he destroyed the place and took the majority of the people into exile, why would he leave people lying around? Was he trying to foment another rebellion? And the answer they give is, as described also in 2 books of the prophets, that Nebuchadnezzar realized that the land was extremely productive that year. There was a lot of exploitation to be had. If he would just leave absolutely nobody around, then it would all go to waste. But he could take out a lot of food, a lot of produce, if he left enough men in every city to farm the place. What they used to do, they used to have a walled city, and around the city was surrounded by the agricultural areas, including the vineyards, the fields of wheat, etc. So he said enough koramim and yogavim, as the people worked the vineyards, enough left behind just to provide Nebuchadnezzar with all of his produce. That was his plan. So he had an interest in Gedalia staying there and supervising this for his own purposes, not because he was kind. But this was to the Jewish people's advantage, as told to them by Yirmiyahu Navi. If you stay here now and you just play along, Gedalia came from a family that was known for just following what the Navi said and not creating too much of a fuss. This would be the beginning already. God had already relented in his language. He had said that, Nichamti, you got your punishment, and now just climb the ladder. Work steadily to this. The problem was, this isn't something that many people who would not believe in prophecy could believe. Was they saw what had happened. They had been involved in wars and rebellions and sieges from these Babylonians for the better part of the last 15 years. And they had seen how much slaughter had happened, how many people taken to exile. They did not trust the Babylonians. Further, there were people who were just jealous. Gedalia ben Achikam did not come from a royal family. And apparently there are some people who had a claim to the throne, or at least a small claim to the throne, who were jealous of this. They felt that perhaps one of their own should have been appointed governor. And that created problems. And lastly, so there's different parties involved. The last group of people who also didn't want to go along with this were people on the eastern side, Moabites, okay, Bnei Lot. And they had an interest in taking over the place for themselves. So even though their interests were entirely different than those of who were, let's say, jealous of Gedalia just for his position, they found common ground in this, that they didn't like Gedalia and they wanted to bring about his death. And there were even some people, Jewish people, loyal Jewish people, who realized this and tried to warn Gedalia, look, this Ishmael ben Netanya, he wants to kill you. And he's actually working with Baalis, Melech Moab, and there's a whole conspiracy going on. There are too many people here who want to kill you, so maybe you should take precautions. And he did not listen to them, and then he got what he got. So the problem was that even though they had this great chance, there were too many others who had ulterior motives, impure ones, and that led to what happened. That's why this is such a terrible tragedy. Afterwards, Yirmiyahu told the people, the survivors, you still don't have to flee to Egypt. You can still recover from this. But the problem was, they were thinking sociopolitically, no, Nebuchadnezzar is going to come and take terrible revenge, so let's flee to Egypt. To which the prophet's response was, you run away to Egypt, he'll still catch you there, and he'll still get you. But if you stay here, God will protect you. But they couldn't believe it. As a matter of fact, this happens a lot. Political types who don't really believe in God tell us that we can't do X, Y, and Z. Not because maybe if you study basic, Tanakh and basic, Talmud, you'll come to the realization that this is what God wants. It's very clear what God wants from the Jewish people. It's written in books now. But people say, yeah, but it's not realistic. That we can't do because I'm a politician, or I have a degree in sociology, or whatever other nonsense they tell themselves they have. And then they decide that just this is not going to happen. You're familiar with this type of attitude? Yeah, I think the prime minister is possessed of this attitude. He says, for example, that the biblical commandment to conquer the land of Israel and to settle the land of Israel is, in his own words in Hebrew, not realistic. Which, by the way, is an old shita. That was the shita of whom? The Meraglim. They had the same opinion. But what are you supposed to do? God has told us what to do, and it's in the Torah what to do, and the Torah is eternal. Remember, you're not allowed to say mitzvos one time, and now today, no mitzvos, or certain mitzvos were then, but not now. What do we call a person who believes in that type of idea? He's, the Christians are one example there of a minim. Okay, you're saying mitzvahs were temporary. Okay, so we have a problem. We have to get over these problems. So why the Rambam says we're still doing the same things. If you have Jewish people who tell you staying in the land of Israel and trying to settle it to the best of our ability and fighting our enemies is problematic, or they're goyim, they're foreign conquerors, and Nebuchadnezzar or Brandon, whoever it may be in this generation, does not let us do it. Those people are exactly like the Rambam describes. They're continuing Ma'aseh Avotenu. Okay, so Gedalia resulted because of what, certain attitudes and certain actions, and we see it continuing today, which is why we have to give up on these things. Rambam continues. When we remember these things, nashuv lehetiv, we'll repent, we'll do better. Shneimar says they will confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers. My question: I can confess that which I have done. Can I confess that which my father or my grandfather did? Well, yes, if I'm doing exactly like they did, so I'm confessing their sin also. If you want to confess the sin of the Meraglim, say, we do not have confidence that God could let us take over the land of Israel. So that's continuing that shita. So you have to confess and say, no, now we are going to try. That's the basic that God requires of us, and he'll do the rest. Weiluhain. So, sorry. I jumped backward in the paragraph. Here, 1 second. He says here, "V'sibev lahatem galutam." Once Gedaliah was dead, so that's it. There is going to be a complete exile. It used to be there were some Jews left in the land of Israel. What happened once Gedaliah was killed? The land was completely empty. La'asiri b'tevet. What happened on the 10th of Teves? Shaboz samach melech Bavel Nebuchadnezzar harasha al Yerushalayim. It was that day that Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel samach on Jerusalem. What is samach in this case? He leaned on the wall. It means he brought his siege mechanisms against the wall. What they bring? They had scaffolding. They want to make a siege. Why would you put scaffolding around the wall of the city if you're trying to besiege it? So you could get over the top of the wall. Right? So easier. If you try to just walk up to the wall, so you're at a disadvantage, what will happen to you? The people on top of the wall on the inside will just drop bricks onto you. They won't even need heavy ammunition. They have the advantage. So samach is another verb meaning he laid siege to Jerusalem. And he brought it into siege, and matzok means, in this case, it means tribulation. It means the starvation. Once you besiege the city, nothing goes in, so they start running out of food. On the 17th of Tammuz, 5 things happened then. This is a Mishnah. Nishtaberu haluchot. The luchos were nishtabru. Interesting word. Didn't Moshe Rabbeinu smash them himself? So really, if we'd say the proper Hebrew verb should be shuberu haluchot. Moses smashed them, so they were smashed. Nishtaberu is a nitpa'el. It's a nifal and a hitpa'el, meaning they're basically taking Moshe Rabbeinu out of the question. That is, even if he hadn't made the executive decision to smash them, They would have gotten smashed some other way. God would have made a miracle. God would have brought it about that they would be smashed. The car is that they were smashed then. This is also euphemism. So what if the luchos were smashed? What does that matter? No, it's the anniversary of Chet HaEgel. Why? Because it says that they had made the Egel, but Aaron had a delay mechanism. The whole thing with making the Egel itself was him trying to buy some time. They only started the Chag Lashem Machar via Kubu Litzachek. When did that happen? The day after they made the Egel. And that's the day Moshe Rabbeinu came back down and smashed the Luchos. So the main sinning happened the day the Luchos were smashed, but it doesn't say Chet HaEgel. It's a nice way of saying it. Uvatala Tamid Bibayith Rishon. This is also the day in first temple times when they were no longer able to offer the Tamid. That means the daily offering. One lamb in the morning, one lamb in the afternoon. They ran out of lambs. And on the 17th of Tammuz, that's when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. Saraf, Apostomus, Harasha, Sefer Torah. And Apostomus, the wicked Apostomus, burned the Sefer Torah then. My question to you and many is, we do not necessarily know who this Apostomus was or when. And also, even with a name like this, is he a Greek fellow or a Roman? Now we know that there were troubles with the Greeks, let's say in the negative 2nd century, and they did all sorts of things like prevent the Jews from keeping the commandments. People confuse the Greek persecutions with the Roman persecutions. The Greek persecutions basically ended in the year about negative 165. That's when the Hanukkah miracle happened. Before that, they were told, for example, that they can't keep things like Shabbos and Milah. But in the 2nd century, Leminyanam, we also have the Hadrianic persecutions, which were quite similar. In what way? Same thing. You can't teach Torah, keep Shabbos, and Milah. So there's some overlap there. And also, many of these Roman types have foreign names. They're not Greek. They're Latin names. Many times they're Grecian Latin names. There's some overlap there also, especially because the spoken language at the time was not necessarily Latin. Even in most of the Roman world, especially in the land of Israel, what did most people speak? Greek. They were still speaking Greek. And in Egypt, they were still speaking Greek. They weren't speaking Latin. Latin was, I think, limited to people who knew it, and mostly it was spoken in what's today Italy. So it's kind of difficult to say when and who this Apostomus was, and also that he burned a Sefer Torah. Many Sefer Torah have been burned over history. So the question is, what's going on here? Yeah. Yeah, but that's why I said Apostomus to Russia. Yeah, there's even mentioned in the Mishnah, there was an Aristotle the Jew. Okay? There was a well-known Jewish Aristotle mentioned in the Mishnah. Who was he? A little bit confusing, but yeah. And of course, Jews adopted the name Alexander hundreds of years before the destruction of the Second Temple. So yes, Hyrcanus and Antigonus, right? Great rabbis with names like that. Those are totally Greek names. So it's very hard to say who this fellow was. I've never seen correct or a certain identification. Was there a question there? Well, and Aristobulus also. How many Aristobuluses were there? Quite a few, and most of them are Jewish. Okay. The Amid Selem Baichal, and he also set up an image, that means an idolatrous image, in the temple. These types of things happened, by the way, in First Temple times also. There are even Judean kings who set up Avodah Zarah in the temple. So I would imagine that when it says here, Apostomus burned the Sefer Torah and put it Selem in the Heichal, my best guess is that it's referring to what happened in the Second Temple with the destruction that who was it? It wasn't Vespasian, it was Titus. Titus had some sort of general who did these things, who took not just one Sefer Torah, but the Sefer Torah. It used to be that there was an official copy of the Sefer Torah. The Ezra Sefer Torah was kept in the temple, and that was the one that they used in Second Temple times, which to copy from all the others. That was the official Sefer Torah. In First Temple times, which Sefer Torah did they have? The official version? The Moshe Rabbeinu one. So, things get lost through history. Things also wear out. Eventually, a Sefer Torah doesn't. There's no reason to say that Moshe Rabbeinu's Sefer Torah was magical in some way that it didn't eventually disintegrate. So Ezra had his official Sefer Torah, and there was one in the temple that they kept, from which they copied others. So it seems that it's referring to the official Sefer Torah was destroyed at this time, and that the setting up of the images in the temple happened shortly before it was destroyed. It also says more than 100 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, Pompey entered the second temple also. Well-known case. Apparently he brought upon himself some sort of curse, and he also tried to defile the place. So, but yeah, but that was in Modi'in. But yes, when his children got to the temple, they also found it desecrated. Unfortunately, you could count quite a few times how many times. I guess this would be an exercise. How many times were the first temple and second temple desecrated with idolatry and the like over the course of their history? Quite a few times. Okay, it wasn't destroyed all the time. It's a miracle that the Greeks and the Hellenists, that is the Jews, the Slavim, who were basically acting like Greeks, did not destroy the second temple when they had the chance. Why did they do it? Because they didn't care. They first used it as a place of avodah zarah. They took it away from the regular Jews and said, okay, we'll have, sacrifice pigs and all that, appoint a person who's not even a priest to be the high priest. But once they had gotten rid of the Jews, it's like the fights at the Kotel Plaza. You give the reformers and everybody what they want, and then once they have something, they're like, yeah, but we didn't actually want this. We just wanted to cause trouble for you, right? So they leave it. Well, you know what I'm referring to. There's supposed to be to the east of the Kotel, to the right. No, that'd be to the south. Of the Kotel Plaza, there's a place where you can have egalitarian services. You're allowed to have mixed davening and things like that. How often do they use the place for that? Never. You know why? Because if you're the type of people who want to have such non-traditional or whatever it is type of Judaism, you're not actually interested in Judaism. You're only interested in causing trouble for the Jews who are trying to just do things regular at the Kotel. So too, the Hellenists, etc., when they finally got the temple in their hands, and there were no regular Jews and regular Kohanim there anymore for a few years, they lost interest in the place because the only reason why they wanted to cause trouble at the beginning was to cause trouble. They didn't have some religious reason. And the same thing continues now on the Temple Mount. On a regular day, how many Muslims or Arabs go to visit the Temple Mount just because it's a holy place to them? It's open. The doors are open. There's all these gates where they can walk in freely. There's no metal detectors. No one's stopping them. Do they go in droves to daven there or do anything there? And the answer is absolutely not. Sometimes they just use it as, like Chazal said, kapandaria. They go through there to eat their lunch or something, or they're on their way to school, or to kick around the soccer ball. But the place is not holy whatsoever. It's just a big open public park that they use as a shortcut. And what? Yeah. Yeah.
Barbershop last week.
Okay.
Saw a Muslim facing Mecca.
Yeah.
And our bike was the other way.
Yeah. So they don't really care, except they force them on special occasions and on Fridays to go there. They close the mosques and things like that, and they tell them you can only go here. So Mamela, they go there, or they pay a lot of people. Remember, they have infinite amounts of money. The American regime has given your enemies billions and billions of dollars, untold amounts of money. That way your enemies can kill you. And that's why they have infinite supply of ammunition and rockets and things like that. We have to go begging for our soldiers that they should have some armor and a little bit of make a barbecue. But the enemy doesn't have to raise money because the enemy has infinite amounts of money. So sometimes they use some of that money to bring people there. Because if there wasn't this money and they weren't forcing people to go there, they would not be going there because they don't care about the place. What's your question?
Bumped into this guy who threw people down the hotel.
Yeah.
He was anti-religious, what we say about separately.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to him, there is another place, I said, it's called Kotel Katan.
Yeah.
You can have a mixed meaning there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right, he says.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it is a Kotel, but nobody's minds if it's ladies or men.
yeah, there's all sorts of places to go. There's nothing sacred. The current Kotel Plaza is no more sacred than any other part of the western wall of the Temple Mount. There are places even closer to the temple. And also the eastern side. Why shouldn't we pray at the eastern side or the southern side or the northern side? When Chazal said that the holy presence has never left the western wall, it's referring to the western wall of the sanctuary edifice, which is on the Temple Mount, and where Jews go to pray nowadays. But it wasn't referring to the western retaining wall of the temple. Okay, so we have to get back on track. Rambam continues, B'Tisha B'Av, he quotes the Mishneh, Chamisha Dvarim Eiru Bo. 5 terrible things happened then. Nigzar al Yisrael b'Midbar shelo yikan nesula aretz. It was decreed upon Israel while they're still in the wilderness that they shall not enter the land. We read about that in Parshas Shlach. We're going to read about that also in Parshas Devarim. To Moshe Rabbeinu, that was the biggest mistake. The people, during one night, expressed their rebellion. They said it's not realistic that we should enter the land of Israel. Let's go back to Egypt. Okay, we should stay living in Lakewood in New York because it's not really realistic today for many Jews to make Aliyah. That was a sin. So every time they're reminded of the Meraglim, they should, think about very carefully what they're saying to themselves and what they say to their children. And the temple was destroyed the first time around and the second time around. We pointed out Lav Dafka there, it was destroyed over the course of a few days, but the main problems both times around, basically the 9th of Av. And a great city was conquered that day. Its name in full Hebrew was Beit Tor, city of the pigeon, and shortened because the first word ends with the taf, and the second word begins with the taf. For short, just Beitar. Okay, great city of Beitar. Vayuba alafim urvavot mi-Yisrael. It had thousands and tens of thousands of Jews. Vayalahem melech gadol v'dimu kol Yisrael ugdolei hachachamim shehu hamelech hamashiach. The Rambam says this twice. They had a great king therein, and the Jews imagined, and the Gedolei HaChachamim, the great sages, believed that he was the king Messiah. The Rambam says this twice. He's referring to Bar Kochba, who he mentions also in Hilchot Malachim. Rabbi Akiva was in the majority. It wasn't just Rabbi Akiva who believed that Bar Kochba was the Messiah. Most of the Chachamim at the time believed so. So it was a problem. When Afal Biad Goyim v'nehargu kulam, he fell into the hands of the Goyim, and all these Jews in Beitar were killed. It was a terrible tragedy, just as bad as the destruction of the temple. Why just as bad as the destruction of the temple? Because the temple was destroyed in the year 69. That ended the Great Revolt. The Bar Kokhba revolt basically took place a few decades later, and the Jews had enough time to regroup. And part of the Bar Kokhba revolt resulted in, at the beginning when the Jews were winning, in retaking Jerusalem and the beginnings of the rebuilding of the temple. They started building the temple. They had an edifice up. They repaved the Temple Mount. It's even depicted on certain coins, Bar Kokhba coins, that they started to do this. Except eventually the revolt was put down by the Romans, and they converted and finished building that temple, and they made it a temple to Jupiter. The Zeus in Greek, but the Romans worshiped Jupiter. Okay, so that was a big problem. So that's why, and also, the big Holocaust happened there in Beitar, and they have exaggerated numbers, but there's a reason for the exaggeration. How many people were actually killed in Beitar? Okay, it's no joke, and that was pretty terrible. With Saraf Apostomus, jumped over here, reading the third paragraph. Uvo bayom hamuchan lefuranut, and that day, which is muchan lefuranut. What does muchan mean? Just ready, just waiting there for troubles. Charash Turnus Rufus Harashabi Malchedom Eda Ichal Vetzvivav. That's when Turnus Rufus, who was Turnus Rufus, Malchedom. Rambam's using the expression. Turnus Rufus was actually a regional governor. He had disputations with Rabbi Akiva, and eventually he was the one who brought about Rabbi Akiva's death. He ordered Rabbi Akiva to be executed. Okay, he had a long rivalry with Rabbi Akiva, the elder Rabbi Akiva. Turnus Rufus was not a Roman emperor. He was a number two. He reported to the emperor, and he lived on the coast somewhere. Rabbi Akiva was in Bnei Brak, and Turnus Rufus was, I guess, more toward the Tel Aviv area. And he says, Malchi Edom, that's a wink, wink. In many cases, Edom is code word for Rome, because they're different places. Edom, historically, was to the southeast of the land of Yehuda, and Rome is on the other side of the Mediterranean. Next, and it says here, he plowed that area, okay? And plowed over the Temple Mount area and also Mount Zion. L'kayim Tzion Sadet Techaresh. Okay, Zion shall be like a plowed field. There are some places it didn't plow, and by the way, it was only ceremonial. What does it matter if a person plows a field? Okay, it turns into a field. It means they would also salt the earth, make sure that the place would be useless for agriculture. Now I understand that if they were using the place for planting crops, that would sort of harm the place, right? How many years would it take for the salt to be washed out by the rain and then bring new topsoil? So it takes a while. If you're talking about a place where they were constructing a building and laying down paved stones, so that shouldn't really matter so much. No, it's the thought that matters. The fact they did this, it was a symbolic act of the destruction of Jerusalem. Rambam continues, these 4 days, Harein before Shimba Kabbalah. They're mentioned in the Torah. Here's the pasuk: Tzoma Revi, V'Tzoma Chamishi, V'Tzoma Shvi, V'Tzoma Asiri. At the end, the Rambam says that the Navi mentioned them because they should be holidays. But here, they were well known. Tzoma Revi is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Shehu B'Chodesh HaRevi'i. Like I said, the fourth month, that's Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Tzoma Chamishi, Tisha B'Av, Shehu B'Chodesh HaChamishi. Tzoma Shvi is Shlosha B'Tishrei, Shehu B'Chodesh HaShvi. V'Tzoma Asiri is Asara B'Tevet, Shehu B'Chodesh HaAsiri. Rambam is basically telling you, because you would have thought, like certain Tanaim believe that when it says the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, and the 10th, maybe it's days of the month. Hamash B'Lah, no, it's referring to the well-known fast days in certain months. Okay, the numbers, the ordinate numbers are referring to the months. Someone should have been astute and wonder, wait a minute, so why do I fast on Erev Purim? Well, here it's actually you don't fast on Erev Purim in the shul, I guess, right? They have a fast day and then just a day off. They have Shushan, they have reverse Shushan Purim, and then they have Purim. But really, there's actually 4 days of Purim. Gemara says there's 4 days of Purim. In a regular year, not a leap year, there's 2 days of Purim. In a leap year, there's 4 days of Purim. There's Purim, Shushan Purim, Purim Katan, Shushan Purim Katan. All 4 days have certain halachas in common. You're not supposed to have fast days or a hesped on those days. You don't say tachanun. However, every place in the world has its one day where it actually observes the Purim. So the 2 Purim Katans are not observed as the Purim. And depending on where you are in the land of Israel or beyond the land of Israel, that's where you keep your Purim, either on day 1 or day 2. But there's supposed to be 4 days of Purim. So the day before that is the 13th of Adar, and we keep that as a fast day. But that doesn't mark anything, historically speaking, involving the destruction of the temple. So why do we fast on the 13th of Adar? As a matter of fact, it's been pointed out by many. You read Megillus Tainus, and it says actually the 13th of Adar was another minor Hanukkah. In Yehuda Maccabee's days, that's when he had a major battle. They held on to Jerusalem, rededicated the temple, and some Greeks and Hellenists were able to regroup, led by Nicanor, the bad Nicanor, not the good Nicanor, and he laid siege to Jerusalem, threatening to destroy the whole place. This time we're going to get those Jews. And what happened? The Jews had a miraculous victory over him, and they also they did a big desecration to his body, which is a good thing to do to a Russia. So that day became Nicanor Day, a minor holiday in Second Temple times. So the question is, why did we turn this Nicanor Day, Erev Purim, into a fast day? It's a good question, especially because it's not a mourning day or anything like that. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's called Ta'anit Esther. But why do we fast thereon? The Rambam continues. He says, by the way, the Ta'anit Esther, you're not going to find it in the most important Talmudic source, which is the Talmud. Okay? What we refer to as Ta'anit Esther is non-Talmudic. It's not in the Mishnah. Everything the Rambam is telling us now, you could find the Mishnayos. You could find the Maseches Tainus. But you know what you can't find the Maseches Tainus? Ta'anit Esther. Not there. Okay? So he says here, where did it come from? Zecher l'Ta'anit shenitanu b'mei Haman. It's in memory of the fast day that they had during Haman's days. Shnemar divrei atzamot v'tzak hatham. It says when we keep Purim, we read on in the Megillah these days of Yemei HaPurim Eileh, where they have Yontif, Sason, and Simcha, but also the fasts, and they're crying out to God. So zecher l'dat, we have also right before Purim a fast day. V'imchal shloshasar b'adar liyot b'Shabbat makdimim u'mitanin b'chamishi shehu achadasar. If Purim is going to be on, if Ta'anit Esther is going to be on Shabbos, we're going to have the fast day on the 11th day of the month, 2 days beforehand, well before Purim. Purim is going to be Motzei Shabbos. We're going to have the fast or beforehand. Normally, there's a rule, akdume puranutha lo makdimon, lo makdiminon, which means we don't try to bring Puranuth early. If you ever have one of these fast days and it falls out on Shabbos, what do? Push it to the next day, push it off. Okay? Like Rabbi Yonasi, he said push it off entirely, but we hold push it off to the next day. Ta'anit Esther is not a day where we mark any tragedy, so it's not bad if we actually have it early. It's meant to be a warning day, a little bit of a minor fast, so we could have, like the Rambam says, tshuva, slicha, mechila, and kapara. So we'll make it early. There is here. Hold on a second. No, okay. There is an opinion that this is Abu Raham. He says that unlike the Rambam and apparently Pshat the Gemara, we hold that if any of these fast days are on Shabbos, when should the fast be observed? Even Tisha B'av on Sunday. We push it off. The Abu Raham claimed somehow this is non-Talmudic. His own diuk in the pasuk is that if the 10th of Teves were to happen on Shabbos, which it doesn't, by the way, according to our calendar, but if it would to be on Shabbos, then we would fast on Shabbos, just like if Yom Kippur is on Shabbos. People like to point this one out. They think that this is actually psak halacha. The problem is the major poskim knew of this idea and they do not hold of it. They say if we were to have a Sanhedrin at least, we'll get back to the part where we have a Sanhedrin, and we would be making our calendar the way you're supposed to, deciding when Rosh Chodesh is based on the sighting of the new moon, then it would be possible, just like the Gemara discusses sometimes Yom Kippur happening on a Friday or a Sunday, which is also not allowed by our current calendar, but those types of events would happen. So too, you get an Asar B'Teves on a Shabbos, we would still push it off. It would still be on Sunday, halachically speaking. So don't get too confused by that. Well, let's finish this halacha. If we'd have one of these fast days fall out on Shabbos, so we'll push it off to the first of the day of the week, which is Sunday. If one of the fast days that we just mentioned, these 4 fast days, is on Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, we will actually fast on Erev Shabbos. Look in your calendar. Can you does a Shiva Asar B'Tammuz or Asar B'Teves or even Tzom Gedalia happen on Friday ever? Asar B'Teves, only Asar B'Teves. It's very interesting how that worked out. Asar B'Teves is the only one. So we fast on Erev Shabbos, just like any other day. Okay? These fast days, they're not as serious as the public fast days that he discusses in the first 2 chapters, and like Yom Kippur, where really you're supposed to daven again. There's Mincha and there's Ne'ilah. These aren't considered real fast days in quotation marks. So you don't have Ne'ilah. But we do have the reading for the fast day after Shachris and Mincha. Remember, the Rambam also holds that Mincha of a fast day, there is no Haftarah. He says the Haftarah is a din in Moadim and Tisha B'Av. So Tisha B'Av, there is a Haftarah, but a regular fast day, other than that, they don't have a Haftarah. And then the Rambam is left with this question. Rambam says also, being that he always has the Haftarah on a day that's a Moed, like a Yontif, he says after you read the Haftarah, there's 4 brachas to be said. 4 brachas after the Haftarah. The last of which is Mikadesh something, Mikadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael, or Mikadesh Yisrael v'Azmanim, or B'Yom HaKippurim. The Rambam implies that you say 4 brachas also on Tisha B'Av. So what's that 4th bracha? Kasha on the Rambam. Maybe then he would agree that there's only 3 brachas to be said, but it's unclear. The Rambam also makes room for the opinion that's mentioned in Shulchan Aruch that even on Yom Kippur afternoon, there's a 4th bracha on the latter Haftarah. So Maftir Yonah, you look in your Ashkenazic Machzer, there is no 4th bracha after Maftir Yonah. It's just like a fast day, so you have 3 brachas. But the Rambam holds 4 brachas. Mekadesh Yisrael v'Yom HaKippurim. And that's still the Sephardic practice until today. Continue. He says here, Aval Korban B'Torah Shabbos Mincha, Shachris Mincha V'Yichal Moshe, Uvchulan Ochalim Shotim B'Layla Chutz Mitisha B'Av. And in all of them, unlike a real public fast day, you can eat at night. If it's technically, it says Asar B'Teves on the calendar, the fast will only start at dawn the next morning. You don't have to fast at night. So none of that applies. Tisha B'Av, we do fast at night. One more issue here. When the Rambam says earlier, 2 chapters ago, he says, when you have a fast day on Erev Shabbos, mitanin umashlimim. What does it mean, mitanin umashlimim? Means you complete the fast. That's la'afuke, Rabbi Akiva and other Tanaim mentioned in Eruvin. We have a longer shiur on YouTube. I recommend everybody take a look at this. The opinion was among Tanaim that if even Tisha B'Av is Erev Shabbos, really it's not right that you fast all up until Shabbos actually begins. So you're likanes b'Shabbos me'uneh. You're suffering as you come into Shabbos. So what they used to do was, around Plaga Mincha time or so, they would break their fasts. Okay, have a hard-boiled egg, drink something, slice of toast, something, so that they go into Shabbos not in the state of suffering. But the Gemara concludes mashlimin. The way the Rambam reads it, we hold not like those Tanoim. You have to fast until Shabbos starts. Okay? So that's what you probably see the practice. However, and that's why I wanted the longer video, check out the thing on YouTube, read the Beis Yosef, read the Pri Megadim, read the Mishneh Berurah. That's a pretty solid line up there. They point out that even if we hold that you have to fast on the Asar B'Teves until Shabbos starts, that's called mashlimin. If you take in Shabbos early, that is mashlimin. The rejected opinion says even before it's Shabbos, because you're getting ready for Shabbos, like Rabbi Akiva, eat something so that you don't start Shabbos. But if everybody were to get ready for Shabbos and go to shul and Lichadodi and Mariv, and it's already after Plag, but even before the sun has set, you could go home and have Kiddush and eat. Shapir Mikrei Hashlama. That's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch. That's what the Pri Megadim points out. You're looking surprised at me. You're looking skeptical. But the Pri Megadim and the Beis Yosef emphasize this. They say don't mistake this. Even if you're machmir for mashlimin, then you could still, that is considered mashlimin. And there's a middle opinion which says mashlimin is an option. You can't break your fast like Rabbi Akiva, but if you want to, you could be mashlim. But even then, you take in Shabbos, that is considered hashlama. So look this up, and we'll take a break now so we could have some more coffee, I guess. Any questions online? Yeah, please. Yeah, hold on. So the Shulchan Aruch actually holds, and this thing you can see, if you want, I'll send you the source sheet. In a number of places, Rabbi Yosef Karo made his opinion very clear, explicit. His opinion was that Shabbos starts at sunset. How he defines sunset is another question, but you have to Shabbos by sunset. Rabbi Yosef Karo believed, therefore, every time you have a Shabbos and Yontif, without exception, every time there's Shabbos and Yontif, you have to take in Shabbos before sunset. And that should be done by the Tzibor through what action? Mariv. The Shulchan Aruch's opinion is every single Shabbos Yontif, including Shavuos, what you're supposed to do publicly is gather for Mariv well before sunset and accept Shabbos or Yontif, no exceptions, every single day of the year. And the Beis Yosef holds that if you have done so, let's say on Friday, that is Asar B'Teves, that killed the fast. Nafkamina, let's say the sun sets at 4:40 p.m. on Asar B'Teves, like it normally does in Jerusalem. According to the Beis Yosef, at 4 p.m. you should be davening Mariv, or any time after 3:40 or so, which is Plaga Mincha that day. Daven Mariv, go home and have Kiddush, and that is his opinion. So if you want to be a Shulchan Aruch Jew, you'll do this every Asar B'Teves. But for some reason, I've been trying to tell the calendar makers this, they always print that the fast day is over at Seis HaKochavim, which is also well-grounded, that's what Beis Yosef says, but not on Erev Shabbos. On Erev Shabbos, like Asar B'Teves, if it ever happens, you should do like he mentions in the Beis Yosef, and like the other Achronim pointed out, take in Shabbos early, like you're always supposed to, and have something to eat, and that's considered as doing your job. What's the question there? No question? Okay, fine. So we'll break here. Like I said, I recommend everybody take a look at this. Well, so the advantage of living in the southern hemisphere is that everything is upside down, or that's a disadvantage. But in seriousness, in the southern hemisphere, Asar B'Teves is much longer, but Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is much shorter. So it's a trade-off. You want to go live there. But then again, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you are not in Eretz Yisrael by definition. So what's the point? I don't understand. Why do people go to Australia? It's just like you could see a kangaroo in the zoo. You don't need to go all the way there. And boomerangs don't really work. It's just a bubble misa. Oh, okay. Well, if you're that uncomfortable with fasting, being on an airplane for that long, the dehydration that most people suffer from such a long flight is usually worse than if they just fasted a normal fast day. So, yeah, to each his own.